Charles Martin. I'm here today to tell you about how cell phones work and a little bit of history behind the mobile cell phone. $1 million question is, if you're like many other Americans in the 21st century, I'm sure you commonly use this sophisticated radio that we call cell phones. A lot of people probably have never wondered how it works. Some of you have. You kind of wonder how you can make a conversation across the world and how that functions and works and actually happens. I'm going to tell you a little bit about that. Also about how we went from using old style Sagamore cell phone to currently the smartphones like we have here today. Nikola Tesla, he was the inventor of the radio, and in 1900 he patented a couple things which made the radio possible and eventually the cell phone. That was transmitting electrical energy and electrical transmitters to actually run the currents through there. The first ever transatlantic radio transmission was in 1901, and it took 17 patents of his to do it, as he joked. What led to that was his studies in automation, teleautomation as he called it. In 1898, he basically made a radio-controlled boat, and he did it during an electrical convention at Madison Square Garden, and the people that seen it couldn't believe their eyes. They thought it was magic, telepathy. They even went as far to say is it was a trained monkey inside the boat working it. So it was pretty comical that he was able to make something like that happen, and people didn't realize that it was actually real. What further led after his studies in electrical energy and currents and things of that nature was what we see today now as cell phones, towers. These cell phone towers, as soon as your phone is powered up or turned on, your phone's going to connect to the nearest tower in that area or region or grid. Once you do that and you try to make a call or send or receive data, then the signal is going to be brought through that tower down to a fiber optic line in what's called the public switch box. It'll run through that line, back up to the antenna, back to your phone, and that's when you receive a call or receive the data or information that you're trying to get to. So, not to get too technical, but you can kind of see the diagram of how it works there, and I'll try to make it as easy as possible for anyone to see. Really, the cell phones are just a sophisticated radio, is all it really boils down to. You can kind of see a grid of how all the phones evolutionized from the very first box phones used with militaries all the way up to the smartphones now. These first phones were so big and bulky, it generated a ton of power, ton of heat, and were only able to be put in automobiles. So with burgeoning technology and huge increases in the technology and wireless field, we're basically able to make car phones, the original bag phones that you, if any of you remember from in the 80s, is where it all started. But what is really crazy is that the first transceiver handheld device was done from Bell Labs. A lot of people are familiar with them, and it was in 1946. However, it took 27 years before we actually got one that functioned and worked and was affordable to the general public. Motorola's Martin Cooper, he was the engineering executive for him, produced that phone on April 3rd, 1973, 27 years after the first one was done. And the first phone call he made in front of the reporters was to his longtime rival, Dr. Joe Engel at Bell Labs. So it's pretty funny. And that first device weighed 2.5 pounds and was 9 inches by 5 inches. So if you can think of how big that is compared to what we have now, it's pretty incredible. It also took 30 minutes only 30 minutes of talk time. It took 10 hours to recharge as well too. Next thing, the kind of phenomenon of text messaging, as we all know, not a lot of you may know, but SMS actually stands for Simplified Message System. And the first message that was sent was actually Merry Christmas. That was just done back in '93. I know some of y'all are young, so that was probably right around some of you guys being born. And that was sent in Finland, and that was the first person message sent in '93. Now, in the late 1990s, they got prepaid services with cell phones, and that kind of brought on a big uptick in messages being sent. And still to this day, we see the evolution of text messages from younger people all the way to older generations using them more and more. And as of 2012, the average American sends and receives over 1,000 texts per month now, and that's all at age groups and categories. you an idea of how what I call the cell phones kind of changed the game. Just a matter of 30 years, the general public went from having no mobile cellular devices or communication devices other than walkie-talkies or simple radios to 91% now own and use one. It's just unbelievable how, you know, we went from not having anything other than the two-way radio to having these devices that kind of control everybody's lives to a certain extent. Now everybody, if you see here, 80% of users check their phone first thing in the morning, and 1 out of 5 of us will be checking our phone every 10 minutes, if not more. Along with cell phones and now data being able to receive, it was really the first time, unless you had an air card with a laptop, that we were able to do 24/7 mobile access to the internet. And what that led us to is social media, which has kind of changed the world that we completely live in now. And that's all due to how these cell phones came about. If you look now at the mobile applications and many economies that have created from the commerce, it's really a long step from those first phones that were the size of cars almost. So I hope you learned a few things today about cell phones, and try not to use them any more than you